بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحين بنتكلم عن النيورون and nerve induction. نتكلم عن structure حق النيورون which we already know, I think. The cell body, dendrites and axons, and we're gonna list the nerve conduction types, factors affecting the nerve conduction, and illustrate the functional importance of the myelin sheath. I think we already know all the basics of this lecture, but it's very important in the matter of action potential and connecting the dots a little bit. First, the neuron. Neuron is the unit of the nervous system. It's consisting of three basic parts: the cell body, which is the soma, we can call it, or precaryon, and then we have the dendrites, as I'm making them right here, and the axon. The thing connecting the cell body to the axon is the axon hillock. This is the axon terminal. So the communication of the cell body to other cells is through the axon. It's going to send the message until the axon terminal. The dendrites actually collects information. So these are very important. So as we said, the cell body is housing the nucleus and organelles such as mitochondria and all other organelles we know in the cell body, of course. Dendrites اللي هي processes الأطراف اللي هنا, it increases the surface area available for receiving signals from other nerve cells. So هنا receiving, هنا sending. مهم, dendrites receiving signals, الأxon sending, ترسل من الأكسن وتستقبل من الدندرايتس. تستقبل معلومات هي الدندرايتس. مين يستقبل معلومات؟ dendrites. So the dendrites and the cell body هنا, dendrites and the cell bodies are the input zone. هنا تستقبل وهنا تقرر وش المعلومة اللي تبي ترسلها. So the input zone is the dendrites and the cell body. الأكسون هو nerve fiber, single elongated tubular extension, انبوب مطول من السيل بودي إلى زي ما قلنا هنا يرسل signals, conducts the action potential. أنا إذا كانت هذه النيرف سيل وأبغى أعطي action potential إلى other cells, I'm gonna send it and conduct through the axon إلين ما توصل إلى الخلية اللي بالأكسون terminal, الخلية الثانية. كذا إحنا نرسل action potentials away from the cell body, away, كذا الاتجاه, هكذا هو الاتجاه. تمام. Conducting zone of the neuron. فالحين عندنا two zones. The input zone حقت cell body plus the dendrites. The conducting zone الإرسال حق الأكشن potential هو الأكسون. Two parts of the axon are very important. قلنا الأكسون hillock is the first portion of the axon. It's connecting the cell body into the axon. يربط الأكسون بالcell body mean axon hillock, the region of the cell body from which the axon leaves. هنا عندنا neurons trigger zone where the action potential is generated. لو نرجع لرسمتنا هنا زي ما انتم شايفين, هذا السيل بودي هنا عندنا axon hillock. هذا الأكسون hillock منه يكون في generation للأكشن potential and sent through the axon to other cells. فمعلومة مهمة جدا هنا. الأكسون terminal, it releases آخر طرف بالأكسون, it releases chemical messengers that stimulously influence other cells with which they come into close association. فإحنا نرجع للرسمة حقتنا ونتخيل القصة. Cell body plus dendrites, input zone, axon hillock, the conducting axon is the conducting zone. Axon hillock is the triggering of the action potential and generating of the action potential عشان يمشي لين هنا. الأكسون terminal, release of chemical messengers in the axon terminal بالطرف, خلاص وصلت الأكشن potential هنا تفتح الأكسن terminal and it's gonna release chemical messengers. so الأكسن terminal نقدر نسميها output. راجع الcell body plus dendrites input zone, الأكسن conducting zone, الأكسن hillock neurons trigger zone, الأكسن terminal output. خلاص إرسال الرسالة. فنقدر نشوف هنا بنفس الشيء هنا الأكسن هيلوك triggering zone تسوي generation للأكشن potential. هنا الأكسن terminal اللي هو output zone. هنا عندنا النيوكليوس يعني هنا cell body plus the dendrites is the input zone and the axon is the conducting zone. A neuron, remember, the dendrites and cell body is the input zone, axon is the conducting zone, axon terminal is the output zone. Action potential are initiated at the axon hillock. The triggering zone is the axon hillock اللي يربط cell body بالأكسون. احنا قلنا ان الأكشن potentials are propagated يعني ينتشر from the axon hillock to the axon terminal عشان هو action potential. فعلى طول أول ما يصير في generation الأكشن potential من الهيلوك إلين الأكسن terminal بيوصل بسرعة. The cell body the graded potential هذا doesn't have propagation. The local potentials are produced in response to incoming signals. So ممكن يكون في signal ممكن يكون في graded potential بس ما راح يوصل للأكسن terminal. ممكن يوقف بنص الأكسن. It's only local, it dies out. So the action potentials are initiated at the axon hillock and conducted throughout the nerve fiber وتوصل للأكسن terminal and we have secreting of the chemical messengers at the axon terminal. The two types of the axons اللي هم عندنا myelinated and the unmyelinated. وش الفرق؟ طبعا احنا نعرف هذا الشيء من أول المyelination. Myelinated fibers. What is a myelin sheath? Myelin sheath is formed in the peripheral nervous system by the Schwann cells. We already know this information, it's not new. And the myelin sheath is not part of the neuron, is not a part of the neuron. It is formed by the Schwann cell. It covers the axon. يعني أنا عندي هنا dendrites هنا السيل بادي هنا الأكسون تمام. المايلين شيث هنا عندي شوان سيل تيجي تلتف حولها تسبب لي مايلين شيث. It forms the myelin sheath. مين؟ الشوان سيل. هذا وين؟ in the peripheral nervous system. Schwann cells. So this is not, the myelin sheath is not a part of the neuron. It is formed by the Schwann cells. And in the central nervous system, the one forming the myelin sheath is oligodendrocytes. So we already know this information. The myelinated fibers of myelin sheath actually are Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system covering the axons. Each one cells makes one myelin sheath. This is in the peripheral nervous system. In the central nervous system, the brain and the spinal cord, the oligodendrocytes are covering the axons and not the Schwann cells. We don't have Schwann cells in the central nervous system. We have oligodendrocytes. It acts as an insulator. What does this mean? Insulator. It is water-soluble ions that carry current across the membrane. It cannot pass. نركز هنا. It's water-soluble ions that carry current across the membrane, cannot pass. ليش water-soluble? So if we have this myelin sheath covering the axon, and then we have the axon is the conductor zone, and there's an action potential going through. So the myelin sheath prevents prevents the action potential into propagation outside the cell membrane. It carries the current across the membrane. It helps the current to go in one direction. So between the myelinated regions, there is a node of Ranvier. So this is also important. So if we go here, we can see that in between each myelin sheath and another, we have the node of Ranvier. The node of Ranvier is a zone where there is no myelination, where the axonal membrane is not covered with myelin sheath and is exposed to the extracellular fluid. This is the node of Ranvier. So now we go to the clinical application. So in case of a cut axon in the peripheral nervous system, there is regeneration or regrowth of axon due to the Schwann cells. So if we have an injury affecting the axon, a cut in the peripheral nervous system, the Schwann cell is going to regenerate the axon. But in case of a CNS injury or a cut in the axon, which are myelinated by the oligodendrocytes, they do not regenerate. This is a very important clinical difference between the oligodendrocytes and the Schwann. إنه عندنا بالشوان cells بالperipheral nervous system الطرفي we have regeneration, but the oligodendrocytes, they do not regenerate. So this is basically the most important thing in this slide. Conduction of action potential. Two types of propagation. احنا قلنا propagation اللي معناته انه ينتشر. الاكشن potential دائما ينتشر لما يوصل للاxon terminal. We have two types. We have the contagious conduction and the saltatory conduction. The contagious is a conduction in the unmyelinated fibers. The saltatory is rapid in the myelinated. So الفرق المهم between the myelinated fibers and the unmyelinated fibers الغير myelinated إنه الحين لو صار عندي action potential unmyelinated fibers راح يكون بطيء, and the action potential is going to spread along every portion of the membrane. It's going to be contagious زي المعدي من اسمه. فاحنا نجي نشوف السالتاتوري تحسها كذا كلهم مع بعض rapid سريع. Myelination يساعد على سرعة نقل الأكشن potential. The rapid conduction in the myelinated fibers. The impulses jumps over sections of the fibers covered with the insulating myelin. أنا الآن عندي هنا الأكسن, هنا عندي myelin, هنا عندي rod of Ranvier, node of Ranvier. فعندي الأكشن potential jumps over the sections of the fiber covered, يعني على طول يروح. It actually jumps so fast. هذا myelinated. أما unmyelinated, it takes so long. The unmyelinated is contagious. It spreads along every portion of the membrane, and it takes longer than the saltatory conduction. So I have the two types of propagations depending on the myelination. If we have unmyelinated fibers, it's slower, and the action potential spreads along every portion of the membrane. The saltatory is actually rapid. The action potential jumps over sections of the fiber covered with the insulating myelin. So this is the contagious conduction. In the unmyelinated fibers, the slower. The unmyelinated fibers, active area at peak of conduction, هذا اللي هو الأكسن hillock, regenerating the action potential. It's gonna go slower. It's gonna take a long time. But if you see the saltatory conduction, which is in the myelinated part, it's faster, it's rapid. So it's gonna go from here to here. It's gonna jump. And the portion there that is myelinated, because it's water soluble, it's gonna help to make the action potential jump from each node of Ranvier into the other. So it's faster because it doesn't have action potential هنا بالنص. So it's faster, and the saltatory conduction is an action potential propagation in the myelinated axon. So this is important. So ممكن يجينا سؤال المyelinated axon ايش التايب of conduction؟ راح نقول saltatory. unmyelinated axon ايش التايب of conduction؟ راح نقول contagious conduction. So in the saltatory conduction, the myelinated axon قلنا it jumps from no different way to another. Direction of action potential هنا. It's a propagation of saltatory conduction. طيب. Saltatory conduction مرة ثانية. أول ما أشوف saltatory myelinated propagates action potential faster than the contagious conduction because action potential does not have to be regenerated at the myelinated section. So ممكن يجينا why it's faster. It does not have to be regenerated at the myelinated section. هنا زي ما انتم شايفين مو بلازم هنا يعطيني action potential عشان نروح هنا. It can jump because of the myelinated section. Myelinated fibers conduct impulses about 50 times faster than the unmyelinated fibers. يعني 50 مرة أسرع من unmyelinated. Saltatory 50 مرة أسرع من contagious. Conduction in nerve fibers. Conduction depends on two factors. الحين نشوف إيش الفاكتورز. Diameter of the nerve fiber. diameter اللي هو قطر التيوب حق الأكسون على حسب. الأكسون is myelinated or non-myelinated. طبعا هذا أهم واحد قلنا عشان ممكن يكون أسرع أو لا. So the conduction in the nerve fibers depends on two factors. The diameter of the nerve fiber and whether it was myelinated or unmyelinated. طبعا myelinated قلنا saltatory conduction, unmyelinated قلنا contagious conduction. Myelinated is faster. So نجي نشوف diameter. How does the diameter of the nerve fiber will affect the how does it affect the conduction? So the nerve fiber with small diameter conducts slowly, but with the large diameter conducts faster. يعني لو كان diameter حق النيرف fiber small it's slow. لو كان large it's fast. That's it. This is how it's going to affect. The conduction is slow in the small diameter. The conduction is faster in the large diameter. Okay. The second factor, myelinated fibers. Myelinated fibers conduct faster than the unmyelinated. Why? So هذه يمكن 3 مرات تجينا خلاص مهمة جدا. Myelinated nerve fiber have saltatory conduction. Why? Because it does not have to propagate in the myelinated section. نرجع هنا نشوف. Does not have to be regenerated at the myelinated section. It's a very important sentence to understand. This is the nerve fiber types in the mammalian nerve. We can see in this chart, it's not very important, but it's important to understand that the diameter can affect the conduction. So the larger the diameter, the bigger the conduction velocity, the faster it is. So the smaller it is, the slower is the conduction. It's very important to understand. That's it. The two factors affecting the conduction. The conduction قلنا summary. Okay خلاص we're done now. Small diameter, slow. Large diameter, fast. Myelinated nerve fiber conduct very fast and faster than the unmyelinated. Why? Because it doesn't have to regenerate the action potential at the myelinated regions. That's it. And thank you so much for listening and watching my channel. Anyone who have a question, you can contact me, Khulud Sayo, and I would be very delighted to help you all with what I can. Thank you so much.